1985, a female deputy and the town sheriff set out on what was supposed to be a routine night patrol. They never returned. For over a decade, their disappearance haunted the small Texas border town of Presidio, becoming one of the longest-standing mysteries in the state's history. Then, 16 years later, a pair of hikers stumbled upon something strange, an old, rotting outhouse deep in the Chinati Mountains. What they saw inside would flip the entire case upside down and reveal that investigators had been following the wrong trail from the very beginning. Presidio wasn't the kind of place where people vanished without a trace. In 2001, it was still a quiet, close-knit community of fewer than 3,000 people, where secrets didn't stay buried forever, especially not under the unforgiving desert sun. Detective Simon Reyes had seen his fair share of cases, but something about the town's atmosphere that day felt heavier than usual. He was buried in paperwork on a recent missing person report when Officer Martinez burst into his office, out of breath, sweat on his brow. "Detective," he said, barely catching his breath, "we just got a call from a park ranger. Some hikers found a body way up in the mountains." Simon looked up sharply. "Another missing teen?" Martinez shook his head. "No, sir. It's an officer, still in uniform, and from the look of it, the body's been there a long time. They found it inside an old outhouse." The room went still. Simon's mind snapped into gear. "Pull the 1985 case file, the one on Sheriff Ray Holbrook and Deputy Leah Ortega. They're the only officers we've ever lost without explanation." Martinez's eyes widened. Everyone in the department knew that case, Presidio's most notorious cold case. As the young officer sprinted off, Simon grabbed his jacket and moved downstairs. The news had already started spreading. Officers moved with urgency. By the coffee station, Detective Kara Dupont was just setting down her cup when Simon called to her. "Kara, this might be linked to Holbrook and Ortega. I want you with me." She didn't hesitate, grabbing my gear. Simon then turned to two deputies checking equipment by the armory, Debbie Carr and Trish Moraro. "You're coming too." The two women exchanged a look. Something passed between them. Not surprise, but something deeper. A shadow from the past. And Simon remembered why. 16 years ago, they had been young rookies when Holbrook and Ortega vanished. Back then, they came forward with disturbing reports that Sheriff Holbrook had made repeated, unwanted advances and created an atmosphere of fear. They hadn't spoken publicly until after the disappearance. Their statements had helped build the department's leading theory, that Holbrook may have taken Ortega, harmed her, and disappeared. Now, with the discovery in the mountains, that theory was under new scrutiny. As they moved toward the patrol cars, Martinez returned carrying a thick case folder. "Everything we've got on the 1985 disappearance." "Bring it," Simon said. "Fill me in on the road." They climbed into two vehicles, Simon and Martinez in the lead. The cold case file lay open on Martinez's lap as they drove. Sheriff Ray Holbrook, age 42. Deputy Leah Ortega, 25. Last seen leaving the station at 8:47 p.m. on October 15, 1985. Their patrol car was later found abandoned on Highway 67, keys still in the ignition. No signs of a struggle. As the cruiser rolled past the dry terrain, Simon's mind ran through every possibility. "What about the follow-up?" he asked. "Extensive searches back then turned up nothing," Martinez said. "FBI got involved for a time. There were rumors of cartel activity nearby. Locals said Holbrook and Ortega had been digging into reports of missing girls, suspected trafficking. Their last stop was supposed to be the Dusty Spur Saloon. That place had a reputation. A lot of truckers and smugglers passed through. The desert slowly gave way to the rugged slopes of the Chinati Range, rocky, overgrown, and harsh. As they climbed higher, Simon reached for his phone, a number he hadn't called in 16 years, a number he never deleted. "Mrs. Ortega? This is Detective Simon Reyes from Presidio PD." The voice that answered was faint. tired, weathered by years of silence and hope, and this time, Simon might finally have something to say. "Ma'am, I'm calling about your daughter's case. We've just uncovered something in the Chinati Mountains that might be connected," Detective Reyes said gently. "I'll have officers bring you to the scene." On the other end, Mary Sol Ortega's voice cracked, heavy with emotion. "Evidence? After all this time? Is it Laya?" "We're not sure yet, ma'am, but I thought you should know right away. The officers will explain when you arrive." After ending the call, Simon and his team followed the GPS coordinates shared by the park ranger. Their patrol cars bounced along an old, unpaved road, winding through steep terrain and loose rock until a park service truck came into view near a faded trailhead. Two figures stood waiting. The ranger, a sun-worn man in his 50s, extended a hand. "Detective Reyes, I'm Bill Hutchkins. The hikers are just up the trail with my partner. It's about a quarter-mile hike to the site." They grabbed their gear and followed Hutchkins up the narrow, overgrown path. The trail was barely visible, lined with scattered stones and thick brush that made every step a careful one. After a tense 10-minute climb, they reached a clearing where a second ranger stood beside an older couple. At the edge stood a dilapidated wooden structure, the outhouse. Its faded boards leaned with age, and the door creaked open to reveal the dark void inside. The woman, dressed in high-end hiking gear, gave a nervous smile. "I'm Ruth Donnelly, and this is my husband, Carl. We were trying a more difficult trail, something off the beaten path. You know how it is when you're getting older, you want to prove you can still handle it." She hesitated. "I stopped to use the restroom, and I dropped my glasses. Bifocals. Prescription. Expensive. $600, Carl added dryly. "She called for help," Carl continued. "I grabbed a stick to try and fish them out. That's when I saw it. Looked like leather at first." He held up a key ring with a small flashlight. "I keep this with me. Old engineering habit. When I shined it down, I realized it was a boot, and the boot wasn't empty." Ruth's voice grew soft. "We left immediately to find help. We didn't touch anything." Ranger Hutchkins nodded. "When I arrived, we removed the toilet seat for a better look. That's when we saw the uniform, the badge, and what looks like a sidearm. The scene is otherwise undisturbed." Detective Reyes and DuPont slipped on gloves and stepped closer. The structure was simple, just wood planks over a deep pit. But as Simon shined his light down into the darkness, what he saw stole the breath from his chest. A body, resting among layers of dry, undisturbed matter. The desert air and sealed pit had preserved the remains far better than expected. The fabric of a uniform was still intact. A badge glinted faintly. The handle of a revolver was still secured in a holster. "We're going to need a full recovery team," Simon said. "Get forensics and a crew with tools. We'll need to carefully disassemble the structure." As they waited, Simon asked the rangers about the trail's history. "This area's been closed since '92, Hutchkins said. "Unstable ground, risk of slides. We stopped maintaining the route and the facilities. Honestly, I'm surprised they even made it up here. The markers were removed years ago. We found it on an old topo map," Carl explained. "Thought it would be a fun detour." The forensics team arrived within the hour, accompanied by workers with protective gear. They slowly dismantled the wood around the pit, preserving every detail. When the remains were finally brought out, Dr. Patricia Chen, the medical examiner, was stunned. "The environment here preserved parts of the body in remarkable condition," she said, brushing gently across the badge with a soft tool. "We still have a number." Martinez leaned closer, cross-checking with the file. His voice was low. "It's Sheriff Holbrook's badge." A chill moved through the group. If the body was Holbrook's, then the story everyone had believed for 16 years, the theory that he had been responsible, no longer held. Simon turned. Deputies Carr and Mororo stood apart. Debbie's eyes brimmed with tears, while Trish held her arms tightly around herself, visibly shaken. Then, a patrol car arrived. From the passenger side stepped Mary Saul Ortega, supported by a young officer. Time had carved lines in her face, but her gaze remained sharp, still searching. Simon moved toward her gently, prepared to deliver the words she'd feared and waited for all these years. "Mrs. Ortega, before we go any further, I need to prepare you," Simon said quietly. "We've found a body, but it isn't Laya." A flicker of both hope and fear crossed Marisol's face. "Not Laya?" Her voice cracked. "Then who?" Simon hesitated. "We believe it's Sheriff Holbrook. Based on what we've found, it appears he's been here at this location since the night they both disappeared." Marisol's knees gave way, and Simon gently helped her sit on a nearby boulder. "If that's true," she whispered, her hands trembling, "if something happened to him, then what happened to my daughter? What happened to my baby?" Simon knelt beside her. "This discovery changes the direction of the case entirely. We don't know who was responsible. It could have been someone else, or—" He paused, reluctant to say what was on his mind. Marisol's gaze was firm. "No, Laya was a good officer. She believed in helping people. If Sheriff Holbrook is gone, then someone did this to both of them. My daughter didn't run. She didn't hide." Simon nodded slowly, then turned to the park rangers. "How many old outhouses like this are still out there in these mountains?" Ranger Hutchkins thought for a moment. "On abandoned trails? Maybe a dozen within 5 miles. More if you count ones still on public routes. I want teams checking every one of them," Simon ordered. "If someone used this one to hide a body, they may have used others. Whoever did this knew the terrain. They knew this location had been forgotten." He stepped closer to the pit, studying the setup again. Maybe they thought it would be cleaned out soon, taken away with the next service cycle, that the body would be lost. But the trail was decommissioned, so it never happened. While the forensics team continued their work, carefully collecting samples despite the compromised conditions, Simon noticed Deputies Carr and Mororo standing apart, quietly holding onto each other. Debbie's cheeks were streaked with tears, and Trish's arms were tightly crossed, her posture tense. "Excuse me," Simon said to Marisol, then walked over to them. "Are you two doing okay?" Debbie gave a shaky nod, wiping her eyes. "It's just seeing him like that. No matter what we went through back then, no one deserves this. It brings back memories," Trish added quietly. "All of it. It feels so close again." Simon gave them a long look. Something about their response seemed off. He couldn't say why. "Take a few days," he said. "Rest. I'll let you know if anything comes up." They nodded, grateful, and started down the trail with an escorting officer. Simon returned to Marisol. "We've already begun expanding the search. I promise, we won't stop." She rose slowly, her movements heavy with the weight of the day. "After everything I've seen today, I think I need to prepare myself. I've spent 16 years wondering. Maybe it's time to stop imagining she's still out there somewhere. Maybe I need to let her go." Simon placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Whatever you decide, we'll honor it. I'll drive you home myself." DuPont stepped forward. "I'll take it from here, Simon. Go ahead." Simon gathered the case file, secured the evidence bags, issued final instructions to the search teams, and then carefully helped Marisol down the rocky path. Behind them, the weathered outhouse remained quiet, still, and grim, a silent marker of truths hidden and time lost. And somewhere in those mountains, more secrets were waiting. Later that evening, after ensuring Marisol was safely home on the south side of Presidio, Simon returned to the station. The streets were quiet, even quieter than usual, as if the entire town could sense that something had shifted. Inside, the night shift had already taken over, but remnants of the day lingered, half-drunk coffee, scattered reports, and tension that hadn't settled yet. Simon sat at his desk, opened the Holbrook-Ortega file, and spread out 16 years of notes beneath the harsh glow of the office lights. The discovery of Holbrook's body flipped everything upside down. What if Laya hadn't been the victim? What if she'd been involved? But even if she had, she couldn't have acted alone. Not against a sheriff, older, larger, experienced. Someone had helped her, or someone had taken advantage of them both. Simon traced his finger along the old case timeline. In the summer leading up to the disappearance, 3 local women had vanished, suspected to be tied to border trafficking activity. Holbrook and Ortega had been working that angle quietly, following a trail that was getting more dangerous by the week. The case notes showed rising urgency, particularly in the days before they vanished. On October 15, 1985, they'd visited the Dusty Spur Saloon, a rough bar known to attract truckers and smugglers. Witnesses placed them there around 9:30 p.m. The bartender, Miguel Vasquez, remembered them asking questions, pushing for answers, but nothing unusual had been reported. No argument, no incident. They paid their tab and left around 11:15 p.m. Simon leaned back, rubbing his temples. No security footage, no cell signals, just fading memories from people who might have had reasons to forget the details. And that motel across the road, had anyone really looked at it properly? This time, he'd make sure nothing was overlooked. Despite thorough canvassing back in 1985, no one had ever reported seeing the sheriff or Deputy Ortega check into a motel, diner, or even stop for gas. No tire marks, no signs of an ambush on the highway where their cruiser was found. It was like they'd been swallowed whole by the desert night. The soft sound of footsteps made Simon glance up. Detective Cara Dupont stood in his doorway, the fatigue from the long day visible in her face. "The Rangers finished searching the other outhouses," she said, sinking into the chair across from his desk. "Nothing. If there are other bodies out there, they're not in those locations." Simon leaned back slowly, his chair letting out a tired creak. 16 years, he murmured. He was right there the whole time, while we were chasing shadows in the wrong places. "The forensics team is still on site. They'll be working through the night," DuPont replied, checking her watch. "Speaking of which, it's past 8. You should go home. Get some rest. We can go over everything fresh in the morning." Simon nodded, but didn't move. "I just feel like I'm missing something." "Don't stay too late," she said, standing and stretching. "This case has waited 16 years. It can wait one more night." When she left, the silence in the room deepened. Simon tried to read, but the letters blurred. His stomach growled. He hadn't eaten since early morning. The station had mostly emptied out for the night, save for the dispatcher and a few officers. Finally admitting fatigue, Simon secured the case files, locked them in his drawer, and headed downstairs. In the forensics lab, techs were still tagging evidence from the scene. "I'm stepping out for food," he told them. "Call me if anything major comes in." Outside, the October air had turned cool. He sat in his car for a minute, considering his options. Murphy's Diner was the usual pick, but tonight his eyes drifted toward the east side of town. The Dusty Spur Saloon was still open, somehow still standing after all these years. Curiosity pulled him east. He drove through the quiet streets, past darkened storefronts and flickering porch lights, until the bar's neon sign came into view, still buzzing red and blue, still casting broken shadows across the gravel lot. The parking lot wasn't empty. Several semi-trucks and pickups were scattered about. Busy, but not packed. Inside, the air hadn't changed in decades. A country tune spilled from the jukebox, mingling with the smell of beer and fried food. Simon took a seat at the bar, sensing conversation slow slightly when they noticed the badge on his chest. The bartender was new, mid-20s, hair slicked back, eyes nervous. Definitely not Miguel Vasquez from the original report. "What can I get you, officer?" "Detective," Simon corrected. "Bourbon, neat, and a burger, if the kitchen's still open." The bartender nodded and poured the drink. "How long have you been working here?" Simon asked casually. 3 years. Why? "Just wondering. You familiar with a guy named Miguel Vasquez? Used to tend bar here in the 80s. The bartender froze, just for a second, then resumed. "Miguel? Yeah, quit about 10 years ago. Just disappeared one day. Didn't leave a forwarding address or anything." "No idea where he went?" "Nope. Moved out of his place on Elm Street. The owner tried to reach him about his final check. Nothing. Gone." The bourbon slid across the bar. "I'll get that burger started." Simon sipped, watching the room. Most patrons were truck drivers, maps, shipping papers, and fast food wrappers scattered across tables. As the bartender returned, Simon kept it light. "These guys mostly local?" The bartender shrugged, avoiding eye contact. "Some from around here, some from over the border. We get haulers from produce farms, manufacturing, you know." But Simon noticed how his eyes flicked toward a far table where 4 men sat quietly nursing their drinks. And he noticed how other patrons kept glancing in his direction, the ones who arrived after him. Something unspoken moved through the room, the kind of quiet tension you feel when you don't belong. He finished his meal, left a few bills on the counter, and walked to the door. Just before stepping outside, he turned. The bartender was leaning in close, speaking low to the men in the corner, who were all watching Simon as he exited. He got into his car and sat quietly. Whatever this place had become, it wasn't just a roadside bar anymore. It was a meeting point, a hub, and his presence had clearly disrupted whatever threadbare trust existed in that room. He started the engine and pulled away slowly, already planning a return visit, with backup. Then, under the dim dome light, he flipped open the folder he'd brought. There it was, Miguel Vasquez's last known address, listed in the witness report from 1985. Elm Street, Presidio. It was time to knock on some old doors. The address listed for Miguel Vasquez was 59 Cedar Avenue, just a few blocks from the dusty spur. Simon made a note to follow up in the morning with DuPont. Maybe someone in the neighborhood remembered him. Maybe there were still answers hiding behind one of those old doors. But for now, exhaustion was setting in hard. The adrenaline from earlier had drained away, leaving behind only weariness. Simon pulled out of the bar's gravel lot and headed west through the near-empty streets. Only the occasional pickup or delivery van passed by at that hour. Quiet, like the town itself was holding its breath. A few minutes into the drive, he noticed headlights in the rearview mirror. A dark sedan, possibly a Chevy or a Ford, kept steady behind him, about 3 car lengths back. At first, he didn't think much of it. It was a main road. But when he turned left onto Mosque Street, the car did too. Another left onto 3rd Avenue, still there. 3 turns could be coincidence. Simon made a sudden, unsignaled right onto Desert View Road. A second later, the turn signal blinked behind him, and the sedan followed. His hands tightened on the wheel. 2 decades in law enforcement had trained him to trust the quiet signals, the way his gut stirred, the subtle clicks of behavior that didn't add up. And right now, everything inside him told him he wasn't just being followed, he was being watched. He glanced ahead. The Chevron station on Palm Street was still open, its harsh white lights painting the lot like a stage. Simon pulled in sharply, pretending to stop for fuel. He watched his mirror closely. The dark sedan approached the station, slowed, then kept going, coasting past without turning in. But for a brief second, he caught a glimpse of the driver, male, Hispanic, wearing a baseball cap pulled low. The car was a dark blue Chevrolet Malibu, late 90s model. He couldn't see the plate. Simon waited, 5 full minutes, sitting at the pump, pretending to scroll through his phone while keeping an eye on the road. The car didn't come back. Probably just nerves, he told himself. Maybe he was still on edge after the way those guys at the bar had stared at him. Maybe it was nothing. He pulled back onto Palm and resumed his normal route. But 10 minutes later, as he turned onto his own street, his heart sank. There it was, the same blue Malibu, parked 3 houses down, no lights, engine off, silent. He slowed, studying the house. Number 47 Cedar Avenue. All the windows were dark, no signs of movement, no porch light. He rolled his window down halfway. The street was quiet. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. The constant hum of air conditioners filled the gaps between crickets. Then it came, a sudden crack of breaking glass, followed by a muffled voice from inside that same dark house. Simon grabbed his radio. Unit 23 to dispatch. I'm at 47 Cedar Avenue. Just heard glass breaking and shouting from inside. Beginning wellness check. Copy, Unit 23, came the reply. Backup available if needed. Standing by. Simon knew the closest unit was likely 10 to 15 minutes out. He was on his own. He approached the house slowly, hand near his holster, but not drawing. At the door, he rang the bell. Nothing. So he knocked, firm and clear. Police. Is everything okay in there? After a pause, footsteps approached. The door opened a crack, revealing a Hispanic man in his 40s, jeans, white undershirt, tired eyes. Unfamiliar. Evening, officer, the man said. Everything's fine. Simon kept his tone measured. We got a report of glass breaking and shouting. Mind if I ask what happened? The man let out a soft breath, nodding toward the inside. I knocked over a vase. Belonged to my wife's mother. She got a little emotional. You know how sentimental people can be. Is your wife home? I'd like to speak with her, just to confirm she's all right. She's in the bathroom cleaning up. Was pretty upset. He stayed planted in the doorway, body angled to block the view inside. But Simon leaned slightly, trying to see past him. The interior was dim. He could just make out a shape on the couch, a person, motionless, slumped. Sir, who else is in the house? Just me and my wife, like I said. But that shape hadn't moved once. Simon's instincts flared again. He was alone, no backup yet, and without clear cause to push further. A vase and a domestic argument weren't enough to justify force, not legally. He keyed his radio. Unit 23. Resident reports accidental breakage. Domestic matter appears resolved. Clearing for now. Copy, Unit 23, came dispatch. Simon gave the man one last measured look. All right, sir. Sorry to disturb your evening. You too, officer, the man said, already easing the door closed. Simon walked back to his cruiser slowly, every step sharp with unease. He climbed in, shut the door, and just sat for a moment. Then he pulled out his phone and dialed DuPont's number. She picked up, voice thick with sleep. Simon, what's wrong? I'm sorry to wake you, he said, his voice low, eyes still fixed on the house. But I've got a situation. Simon quickly brought DuPont up to speed, the visit to the dusty spur, the car that tailed him, and the strange encounter at the house on Cedar Avenue. Something's off, he said, gripping the phone. That figure I saw on the couch, if his wife was in the bathroom, who was that? Now fully awake, DuPont's tone sharpened. You think it's connected to the Holbrook case? The timing's too clean. I show up at the bar where Holbrook and Ortega were last seen, and suddenly I'm being followed. Then this house? It's not just a coincidence. He paused, a detail snapping into place. Wait, the address, 47 Cedar Avenue. That's only a few doors down from where Miguel Vasquez used to live. His file lists 59 Cedar. DuPont didn't hesitate. In a town like this, that's worth a second look. I want to keep eyes on the area tonight, Simon said. Can you meet me? I'm parked at the Chevron on Palm. Give me 15 minutes. I'm on my way. Simon drove the short distance to the station's usual refueling point and pulled into a corner spot with a clear view of the road. The Malibu was gone when he passed 47 Cedar earlier, but deep down, he knew it hadn't gone far. Whatever was hiding beneath the surface of this town, someone didn't want it uncovered. 12 minutes later, DuPont's personal vehicle slid into the lot. She stepped out in jeans and a dark jacket, her shoulder holster clearly visible. She climbed into the passenger seat of Simon's cruiser and handed him a travel mug. "Brought you back up," she said with a dry smile. "If we're pulling a night shift, might as well be caffeinated." Simon nodded gratefully. "Thanks. Kara, something's moving. I can feel it." "Then let's find out what," she said, checking the mag on her sidearm. "Where to?" "Back to Cedar." They cruised through the empty streets. It was nearly 11 p.m. by now, and the town had gone still, just porch lights glowing and the occasional flicker of TV through curtained windows. As they rolled up to 47 Cedar Avenue, Simon slowed. "That's strange," he muttered. The Malibu was gone, and the house, pitch black, silent, empty. Simon pulled to the curb across the street. Something about the scene felt altered, off. "Wait," he said suddenly. "Look at the numbers." They scanned the row. 45, 47, 49, 51. Then a break. No 53, no 55, no 57. It jumped straight to 61. "There's no 59, DuPont said, frowning. "That can't be right." "Let's check it out." They stepped out, flashlights in hand, walking the sidewalk slowly. The night was crisp, scented faintly with creosote. Simon approached the house he'd visited earlier, still marked 47, but as his flashlight passed over the numbers, he stopped. "Here, look at this." The digits looked newer than the surrounding trim, and just beneath the surface, faint shadows. Old numbers had once been there, painted over, rearranged. "This house used to be 59, Simon said. "Someone changed it." DuPont raised her radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 23. We need a records check on Cedar Avenue, specifically the property now labeled 47. Possible prior address was 59. Numbers may have been altered." While they waited, they moved around the house, checking the yard and windows. Still no lights, no sounds. The car was gone, but someone had been here, and they'd left in a hurry. "Simon?" DuPont called softly. "Over here." She was crouched near the side of the house, her flashlight trained on a ceramic planter. Simon joined her. In the dirt, next to the pot, partially buried, was a small silver pin. Decorative. Shaped like a butterfly, with rhinestone wings. They both pulled on gloves. DuPont gently picked it up and turned it in the light. "I've seen Debbie wear these. She has a collection, different one every day. Her grandmother started it." Simon's stomach sank. "You're sure?" "Positive." They sealed the pin in an evidence bag. "What would Debbie be doing here?" DuPont asked quietly. Simon didn't answer. Instead, he pulled out his phone and tried calling Deputy Carr. No answer. Straight to voicemail. "Try Trish," he said. Same result. No answer. Then dispatch crackled in their radios. "Unit 23. Property records confirm 59 Cedar Avenue was registered to Miguel Vasquez as of 1985. Post-1991 records are unclear, likely a clerical issue. Current resident at the now labeled 47 Cedar is Juan Delgado. Moved in 3 months ago." Simon and DuPont locked eyes. 3 months ago. No sign of Vasquez. No record of ownership transfers. A number changed. A pin in the dirt. And 2 deputies missing. Simon zipped the evidence pouch closed. "We're not dealing with a cold case anymore. We're standing in the middle of something alive." 3 months ago. That was recent. Too recent. Especially considering the altered house number. "Kara," Simon said, eyes narrowing. "We need to check on Trish and Debbie. Now." Trish lived closer, about 6 blocks away on Sage Street. Without wasting another second, they got back into the patrol car and took off down the empty streets. The closer they got, the heavier the silence felt. When they turned onto Sage Street, Simon spotted her house immediately, small adobe-style porch light on, but something was wrong. "The front door's ajar," DuPont said, her hand already near her sidearm. Simon parked at the curb. They approached slowly, quietly, adrenaline sharpening their senses. The door hung open, just a few inches, gently swaying in the breeze. The hallway beyond was pitch black. "Deputy Marraro," Simon called, voice steady. "It's Detective Reyes. You okay in there?" No answer. They exchanged a look, and then Simon nudged the door open wider, flashlight cutting through the dark. The beam caught it instantly. Blood. Dark stains on the entryway tiles. "Dispatch, we've got a possible active scene," Simon said into his radio. 312 Sage Street, blood present, requesting immediate backup and forensics. "Copy," came the reply. "Units en route." Weapons drawn, they entered. A trail of blood led from the front door, droplets and smears across the tile and into the hallway. The house was dead silent, except for the ticking of a wall clock somewhere deep in the shadows. Room by room, they cleared the house. Living room, untouched, though a lamp lay overturned. Kitchen, a few dishes in the sink. No visible struggle. But the blood trail led further, to the master bedroom. There, the signs were unmistakable. The bed was in disarray, half the blankets pulled to the floor. A smear of blood stained the carpet. The sliding glass door leading to the backyard was wide open. No body, no Trish. "She fought," DuPont said softly. "Didn't go quietly." Simon lowered his weapon and tried calling both deputies again. Still nothing. Outside, backup units began arriving. Forensics moved in and started documenting the scene, while Simon paced the living room. "This isn't a coincidence," he muttered. "This morning we find Holbrook's body, and now, tonight, both deputies who testified against him are suddenly gone." DuPont's eyes flashed. "The bartender," Simon turned sharply. "He was talking to the truckers, whispering, pointing at me, the ones at the back table." He grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Detective Reyes. I need a bolo issued immediately. All commercial vehicles are to be stopped before leaving Presidio. Set up checkpoints on Highway 670 and every farm road leading out. No trucks leave this town without inspection." "That's a big ask, Detective," the dispatcher replied. Simon didn't flinch. "We've got 2 missing officers and potential ties to trafficking. Make it happen." "Copy that. Roadblocks in progress." He looked at DuPont. "If they're trying to move Debbie and Trish, they won't waste time." She nodded, jaw set. "Then we go back to the dusty spur." They left the scene to the responding units and sped off. Sirens dark, lights low. Time was running out. When they reached the bar, the parking lot was still half full. Red and blue reflections from their patrol car's lights sliced through the dark. Inside, patrons had already turned to look. The mood shifted instantly. Conversations halted. Glasses hit the bar with less certainty. Simon pushed through the door first, DuPont right behind him. Willie Nelson's voice played faintly from the jukebox, but the tension was louder. Truckers avoided eye contact. A few near the back exit shifted in their seats. The bartender, young, nervous, pretended to be busy cleaning glasses. His hand shook. "We need to talk," Simon said, his voice cutting through the stale bar air. The bartender froze. "Now? I don't know anything." "You're not being accused," DuPont cut in. "Yet, but 2 officers are missing, and you were the last person seen talking to a group of truckers right after Detective Reyes left earlier tonight." She leaned in. "We can talk out here in front of everyone, or privately. Your choice." The bartender looked around, searching the room for someone, anyone, who might back him up. No one moved. His shoulders sagged. "There's an office, in the back." They followed him down a narrow hallway, past sticky floors and flickering lights, to a cramped back room that smelled of old beer and smoke. Metal file cabinets lined one wall. The desk was a cluttered mess of receipts, shipping forms, and unopened mail. Simon shut the door. Dupont positioned herself just to the left, close enough to react, far enough to reach her sidearm. "What's your name?" Simon asked. "Carlos," the young man replied, lowering himself into the chair behind the desk. "Carlos Mendoza." Simon didn't blink. "All right, Carlos, start talking." "All right, Carlos. Here's where we stand." Simon leaned casually against the edge of the cluttered desk, but his tone was firm. "We've been investigating a series of disappearances, young women, all tied to Presidio County. And these cases, they're not random. They're showing signs of being connected to trafficking, possibly drug-related. Now, in a town this size, if anything illegal's moving across the border, especially through regular trucker stops like this one, someone behind this bar would know." Carlos shifted in his seat, trying to stay calm. "I just pour drinks, man. I don't ask questions." "See?" Dupont cut in, arms crossed, voice razor sharp. "That's exactly the problem. When you choose not to ask questions while looking the other way, that makes you part of it. But if you start cooperating right now, that makes you a witness. And trust me, the DA knows the difference." Simon watched him carefully. The tension behind Carlos's eyes cracked. Sweat beaded across his forehead. He hesitated, then finally gave in. Okay. Look, I don't know everything, but I'm not just a bartender. They pay me extra. My job's to watch for cops, DEA, anyone official. If someone like you walks in, I'm supposed to tip off the right people." "Which people?" Simon asked. Carlos hesitated again. "It's a group. They're not your average truckers. They come up from Ojinaga. Always different rigs, but same guys behind the wheel. I just call them the ones with clean boots. You'll know what I mean if you've seen them." "Ojinaga," Dupont repeated. "Chihuahua, right across the border. They call themselves Los Transportistas." "Real original, I know," Carlos said with a weak attempt at humor that quickly died in the silence. "They come through a couple times a week. Sometimes it's cargo, sometimes people. I don't ask what exactly. They make it very clear you're not supposed to." Simon leaned in. "But you've seen something." "What is it, Carlos?" Carlos took a deep breath, as if saying it aloud would make it more real. "There were times I saw girls, not working girls from across the border. These were American girls, looked young, out of it, like they were drugged or scared. Sometimes both. They'd be inside the trucks. I tried not to see it." Simon's jaw tightened. "And you never reported it." "To who?" Carlos snapped, sudden emotion breaking through. "You think you're the first cops to walk through that door? You think I haven't seen uniforms nod at those same truckers and leave with envelopes in their coat pockets?" Simon paused. That line hit harder than he wanted to admit, because if Carlos was telling the truth, Debbie and Trish may have been targets for much longer than anyone realized. "Do you keep drugs here?" Dupont asked coldly. "No, I swear. No drugs in the bar. That's not part of it. I just keep watch, send signals. That's it." Simon glanced at Dupont. Carlos was small time, low in the chain, but he might be their only link to something much larger. "You're coming with us," Simon said. "You'll give a full statement, and you're going to help us ID the people you've seen." Carlos sagged in his chair. "Am I under arrest?" "That depends on how helpful you are," Dupont replied. "Right now, you're a witness. You want to stay that way. Keep talking." They escorted Carlos back through the now half-empty bar. A few patrons still remained, but none met their eyes. Outside, 2 uniformed officers were waiting to transport him to the station. Simon immediately keyed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Reyes. I need Border Patrol to review all camera footage from the last 3 hours. Focus on semis crossing southbound into Mexico. Get truck descriptions from checkpoint logs. and patch me through to DEA and FBI field offices. We've got probable international movement involving U.S. citizens. Active situation." As DuPont got into the passenger seat, she was already speaking to the border crossing supervisor. Her expression said it all. This wasn't a local issue anymore. "If they crossed before the alert hit," she said, "they could already be in Ojinaga," Simon finished grimly. "Then we follow." He pushed the patrol car hard, tires biting into the road as they raced toward the border. Every second that ticked by widened the distance between them and the women they were trying to find. 15 minutes later, the Presidio Ojinaga International Bridge loomed into view, its bright perimeter lights creating a strange artificial glow in the desert darkness. Simon pulled up fast. Agents were already setting up secondary checkpoints. One of them approached, serious and efficient. "Detective Reyes, we checked the feed. A Freightliner semi crossed southbound at 11:02 p.m., 8 minutes before your alert went out. Plates registered to a shipping company out of Ojinaga." "That's our truck," Simon said. "What's the protocol for cross-border pursuit?" The agent handed Simon a tablet. On screen, a grainy video showed the semi-truck crossing the border. The timestamp confirmed it, 11:02 p.m., just minutes before the alert had gone out. FBI and DEA are already in coordination with their counterparts in Mexico, the agent said. "Because this potentially involves the abduction of American law enforcement, you'll be operating under the bilateral case initiative. Mexican federal police have jurisdiction, but you're authorized to observe and assist." Within minutes, a convoy formed. FBI SUVs, DEA units, and several vehicles from the Mexican Federal Police. Under normal circumstances, the paperwork would have taken hours. But post-NAFTA protocols and the nature of the case, American officers in danger, triggered emergency cooperation. As they crossed the international bridge into Ojinaga, the Rio Grande below them shimmered like a dark scar in the moonlight. Simon felt the weight of it, leaving U.S. soil, stepping into a jurisdiction where they were no longer in control, only guests. Waiting on the other side was Captain Roberto Hernandez, a veteran officer with a quiet, commanding presence and a silver streak at his temple. His English was flawless. "Detective Reyes," he greeted. "Our surveillance team tracked the truck. It's been parked for the last 40 minutes outside an establishment called La Rosa de Fuego, the Rose of Fire, in the Zona Rosa. The red light district," DuPont translated, though Simon already understood. "It's a known location," Hernandez continued. "Ties to organized networks. We've been monitoring the site, waiting. But tonight's events, they changed the timeline. We move now." As the convoy pushed through the streets of Ojinaga, the character of the city shifted. Paved streets gave way to uneven dirt roads. Crowded buildings loomed close, colors fading into shadows. Then came the bright chaos of Zona Rosa. Neon signs flickering in pinks and blues, music pouring from clubs and bars, women calling out from doorways. The truck sat outside a gaudy two-story building, its exterior painted a bold, faded pink. A flickering neon rose buzzed above the doorway. Other vehicles lined the curb. The place was still very much alive. Captain Hernandez coordinated the operation with crisp authority. "We move quickly, all exits secured. DEA handles any controlled substances. My officers process Mexican nationals. FBI will assist with U.S. citizens." He turned to Simon and DuPont. "You two, find your people." The entry teams hit the building from both the front and rear, bursting in with a shout of "Policía Federal." Chaos followed. Patrons scrambled. Shouts and screams erupted. Doors slammed. Furniture crashed. Simon and DuPont moved through the narrow corridors with purpose, clearing rooms, scanning every face. Some women were dazed, others frightened. Some simply stared, numb. DEA agents uncovered packages of narcotics in a back office. Mexican officers had several men face down on the floor, faces Simon recognized from the dusty spur. "Simon!" DuPont's voice echoed from upstairs. He took the stairs 2 at a time. In a small room, dimly lit and stripped of warmth. Deputies Debbie Carr and Trish Mororo sat on a stained mattress, still in uniform. Their hair was disheveled, their faces streaked with tears. Trish looked up, eyes wide. We didn't think anyone would find us. You're safe now, Simon said. Let's get you out of here. He motioned to DuPont, who immediately began guiding the two women back downstairs. But Simon kept moving, room by room, checking for others. At the very end of the hall, in the last room, he opened a door. She sat there, motionless, on the edge of the bed, a woman in her early 40s, wearing a thin silk robe. Her expression was hard to read, faint shock, weariness, something else. But Simon knew instantly. It was her, Deputy Laya Ortega. She didn't run, she didn't speak. A man who'd been with her had already fled toward the window the moment the raid began, leaving her behind. Simon stepped slowly into the room. "Ma'am," he said gently. Then, switching to Spanish, "Señora, soy el detective Simon Reyes, Departamento de Policía." She didn't flinch. "I speak English," she said quietly. Her voice was flat, almost hollow. "What are American cops doing here?" "I'm Detective Reyes," he said again, softer now. "I've been working your case. You're Deputy Laya Ortega, aren't you?" Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, sadness, maybe disbelief that anyone still remembered her name. "You're too late," she whispered. 16 years too late. "It's never too late," Simon said firmly. He radioed DuPont, confirmed the recovery of the other deputies, then gently closed the door behind him. He didn't want her to be a spectacle. "I know this isn't how you pictured being found," he said, "but you were one of us, a respected officer. You still deserve dignity." She laughed, short, bitter. "Dignity? Look where I am. Look what I've become." She glanced around the dingy room. "I'm the kind of person we used to lock up." "You're not," Simon said, stepping closer. "You're not that. You're someone who survived." She looked up at him, eyes glassy. "Then why does it feel like I disappeared a long time ago?" Simon didn't answer immediately. He didn't have to. Instead, he offered her his jacket, not as a statement, as a gesture, and for the first time in 16 years, Laya Ortega stood up. "What happened to you wasn't your fault," Simon said quietly. "You didn't choose this, and this morning, we found Sheriff Holbrook." The moment the name left his lips, Laya flinched. Her composure cracked. "Ray," she whispered. "You found Ray?" Simon nodded. "In the Chinati Mountains, an old outhouse on an abandoned trail. He'd been there the entire time." She went silent, and then, slowly, the weight of it all began to hit her. 16 years, she breathed. 16 years, and he was there. Simon watched her closely, giving her space to process. "Your mother never gave up," he said gently. "Not once. She never stopped hoping." Laya's face twisted with emotion as she buried her face in her hands. A sob escaped her. "Mama, oh God, I thought about her every day. But how do I go back? After this? After what I've done?" Simon sat across from her, careful not to invade her space, but close enough to offer something solid, someone real. "You survived," he said. "That's what matters. And your mother? She just wants her daughter home, no matter what." The door creaked open. DuPont stepped inside, her voice soft but urgent. "Debbie and Trish are secured. Medics are checking them now. We're also processing several American girls from inside." Simon nodded, then turned back to Laya. "We should get you out of here. Medical team will check you over, and then we can bring your mother here. Presidio's just 30 minutes away. She can be here before the hour's out." Laya looked disoriented, like she was waking from a nightmare she'd lived too long. "She's probably asleep. It's so late." Simon's voice was steady. I don't think she's had a full night's sleep in 16 years. Laya looked at him for a long time. Call her, she finally whispered. Please, I need to see her. They helped her gather what little she had, clothes, a few worn items. Simon and Dupont stayed close, shielding her from the chaos downstairs. The bar had become a storm of paperwork, arrests, and evidence collection. Mexican police were processing detainees. DEA agents cataloged narcotics. FBI staff began interviews. And through it all, Simon made sure Laya moved unseen, untouched. Outside, medics had set up a triage tent. They examined Laya, stable but deeply malnourished. Debbie and Trish were also cleared for transport. All three would need full evaluations. But they were alive. That mattered most tonight. Simon stepped away, taking his phone. His hands trembled slightly, not from nerves, but from the weight of what he was about to do. He called Marisol Ortega. Backlit by the neon haze of Ojinaga's darkest street, Simon gave a mother the one call she'd waited 16 years to receive. Inside the Mexican Federal Police Station, Captain Hernandez had arranged a temporary interview space. The building was plain, concrete floors, the faint scent of strong coffee and antiseptic. Given the international status of the operation, it was the safest place to begin. Simon brought Laya into a small interview room. Metal table, 3 chairs, a space built for clarity. She sat slowly, her fingers curled around a steaming cup of coffee. She wore clean clothes provided by the Mexican Red Cross, but her eyes carried every year she'd lost. I want you to know something, Simon said, placing a recorder gently on the table. You're not under arrest, you're not in trouble, but I need to understand what happened. The beginning. The truth. Laya nodded, barely audible. Where do you want me to start? The night you vanished, October 15th, 1985. Your investigation with Sheriff Holbrook, and your relationship with him. She took a slow breath, her voice fragile. Ray and we were investigating the disappearances of 3 girls, all from Presidio County, all within a few months. There were rumors it was connected to trafficking, something deeper, something organized. She paused. Ray was my training officer, a bit old school, but he respected the badge. Despite what people said later, he never crossed a line. Not with me. Simon nodded. Tell me about the night you disappeared. We clocked out around 8:30 p.m., but Ray wanted to follow up on a lead. An informant said truckers at the Dusty Spur might know something. We got there around 9:30. The place was busy. Music, noise, regular crowd. She looked down into her coffee. Her grip tightened. We split up. I was talking to some guys near the pool table. Ray waved me over to the bar. He'd ordered 2 beers. Said we should blend in. A shadow crossed her face. I didn't think twice. I took a sip. Maybe 2. Then the room started spinning. Ray looked worse. His hands were shaking. Simon's voice was low. You were drugged. Yeah, Rohypnol probably, or something close. By the time we realized it was too late, we tried to get back to the cruiser, stumbled through the doors. She swallowed hard. They were waiting. Who? 4 men. One of them was Raul Espinoza. He went by El Lobo, ran operations between Ojinaga and Presidio. He and his crew surrounded us. Ray tried to fight. He even managed to pull his weapon, but he was dizzy, unsteady. Her voice cracked. They beat him. Tire irons. Then El Lobo pulled a gun, shot him twice. Simon stayed still. Let her speak at her own pace. Someone must have heard the gunshots inside the bar. I was barely conscious, but I heard shouting, arguing. They panicked, threw Ray's body in a truck, dragged me to a van. She went silent, then added, That's when Debbie and Trish pulled up. Simon froze. They responded to the shots? Yes, but they didn't stop it. I heard El Lobo talking to them. Even through the haze, I heard parts of it. Money, Protection? Blame the sheriff. Her eyes were glassy. Her voice steadied. That was the moment I knew I wasn't coming home.